Scott just made the
back to
point.
Thomas Jefferson, you'll
used to
read
be a
that.
lot more secure, not just.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle, and welcome to part 2 of our 3-part trifecta on the power of emotion and especially the power of story. Now, in part 1, we looked at the giant ruckus that's going on about American Sniper, a film that uses the power of emotion and story to portray an extremely pro-American view of the Iraq War, and the left is losing their minds because they understand the power that this has. And if conservatives pick up this sword, it's all over for them. And in part 2, we want to talk specifically about emotion. I want to talk specifically about emotion and politics and why these two things on the conservative side never overlap. And this is a gigantic problem. So let's bring in Steve and Scott to take a look at this issue in a little more detail. Guys, I have a general theory about this. First of all, if you talk to anybody about conservatives, what their view of conservatives is they're kind of old. And what they mean by old is they don't mean they're old necessarily in terms of age. They mean they're old in terms of they seem dried up and rigid and stratified. And when you talk to young people about these ideas, they just seem very cold and very, very distant and inhuman almost. And they've got a perfectly good reason to feel that way because that's how they're presented. So we all know what a Venn diagram is. A Venn diagram is where the circles overlap, right? So if you have the power of emotion and you have politics and the message, on the left, emotion and the message have a one-to-one overlap. They're one on top of each other. On the right, they don't overlap at all. They're completely separate. That's why these people are succeeding and why we're failing. The reason why we're failing is because it doesn't seem like we have any particular emotional connection to the ideas we have. We don't love it. We don't care about it. It doesn't move us. It's not something to get excited about. It's not something to cry about. So this is what I want to talk to you about. So Scotty, let's start with you. We tend to deal with things in a very cut and dried manner. So what I'd like to talk to you about, Scotty, is do you have any statistics on the power of emotion or any particular numbers about why we're afraid to use it so freely?
Well, you know, clearly Republicans don't use emotion because about 67% of the people think that feelings are too personal, and then about 97% of Republicans also believe that that logic does not comport with emotion, and so we can't have both of those.
You make a compelling case.
You know, it's funny. I was thinking. There was a great line from, I think it's Frank Capra, but I'm not sure. It could be somebody else. And he said, this is the guy who wrote It's a Wonderful Life and a lot of other great movies back in the 30s and 40s. And he said, I used to think drama was when the actors cried. I found out that drama is when the audience cries. And that's a fundamental difference. We have an actor who cries. I mean, we have House Speaker John Boehner. But nobody's crying while he's crying.
Well
Everybody's
said.
laughing while he's crying. And so, you know, the left understands. And in fact, you know, right days after President Obama announced his plan to provide, well, I guess plan is kind of a glorious word for it, but announced that he intended and hoped that there would be free college education in community colleges for anybody who could pull a C+. Tom Hanks wrote a column in the New York Times. And for 767 words of an 800-word column, he said not a thing about President Obama's plan. But way down in the last paragraph, he had like 1 or 2 sentences about it. The rest of the article was just about what a great thing it was to go to community college and how he owes everything he is to community college and how he, you know, studied Shakespeare, which he then used in this movie. And he, you know, and he was just telling stories about goofing off at lunchtime and all this kind of stuff. He was connecting with people through their memories and through their passions and their emotions. And we'll probably argue against that with 3 points and a PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. And Steve, if I can just hold on to you for 1 second, because I want to come back to you, but I got to go at something that Scotty just said, because you talked about the guy who wrote It's a Wonderful Life. So this is an important point since it was brought up. You may not think that It's a Wonderful Life is a political film. It may seem like it's the most unpolitical film there is, but it's not. It's a tremendously political film. It's a Wonderful Life is the story of Bedford Falls, and Bedford Falls is America. In It's a Wonderful Life, Bedford Falls, America, is a fundamentally good place. It is a fundamentally good and decent place. Now, Bedford Falls changes when George Bailey, who is just a regular, average, good American citizen, is removed from Bedford Falls when you take the natural virtue virtue of the average American man out of America, then America artificially becomes Potterville. It artificially becomes a dark and evil place, but that's not its natural state. And as soon as the virtue of the average, unknown, regular, faceless American citizen is put back into that world, it reverts to being Bedford Falls, which is a beautiful place, and George Bailey is the richest man in Bedford Falls. That is a profoundly important view of how this country is, and fundamentally, diametrically opposed to the current view of America, which is an evil, awful place where the hero awakens to see just behind the curtain of this fake sort of decency what a terrible place it is, and he sounds the alarm to the rest of the population. That's the power of story. So, Steve, let me ask you this. I think conservatives refuse to touch emotion at all. They refuse to get excited about things. They refuse to get passionate about things, because I think it's a rebound effect against the fact that the left uses nothing but emotion to essentially sway people against reason, fact, logic, and history. So I think we say, hey, if emotion's that's negative, we can't touch it. You think there's anything to that? You think there's some truth to this rebound effect because that's all the left uses is emotion?
Well, I think that's half of it, and I think the other half is, oh gosh, I can't believe this is 15 or 16 years ago now, but I remember sitting on my sofa on a Sunday night by myself watching this brand new TV show debut on HBO. It's called The Sopranos. You probably remember it. It's just amazing storytelling, and storytelling was last week's episode. But in the very first episode, the pilot episode, Tony Soprano, the mobster, here he is pouring his heart out to Dr. Melfi, his psychiatrist, because he's had these panic attacks and wound up in the emergency room. And he asks her, what happened to the strong silent type? What happened to Gary Cooper? And conservatives look back to that type, that strong silent type from Hollywood, whether it's Gary Cooper or John Wayne or whoever that image of virtuous manliness is, as the strong silent type. We don't show a whole lot. We don't express a whole lot. Well, the thing to remember is that strong silent type was not what we were supposed to be. That was a tool in the telling of a story, in affecting the audience with his strength. That doesn't mean that we can't do these things. That was simply a tool for informing, for exciting, for doing these things to the audience. We are still allowed to feel. We are still allowed to express these things. We're still allowed to get excited. Let's do that. Let's enjoy that strong silent type on the movie screen. But let's be real people in real life, shall we?
Let's be real people in real life, shall we? I will give this advice now not just to political operators on the right or to consultants or to politicians. I would give it to every one of my conservative friends just as general advice. Just a little while ago, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I was invited to go see the Michael Jackson show in a Cirque du Soleil show in Las Vegas. I'm not a huge Michael Jackson fan, but I don't pass up an opportunity to see a show like that. And I'm sitting in a darkened theater, and among the many, many miraculous things I saw Michael Jackson running up the walls, running vertically, 3 stories, 4 stories high, running up the walls of the side of the building. I saw him run up the walls. I saw a woman float into the room on a crescent moon as she was singing a song. Now, as I watched these Michael Jackson characters run vertically up the walls, I looked over there and I said, oh, okay, there's the harness, here's the wire, you can see it's attached to his hips at the center of gravity, and it's obviously being pulled on cables, and this is how they do all this other stuff. And here's I can see where the cables are working to bring the woman in on the flying thing. And my advice to conservatives is very, very simple. Folks, you have to learn how to not see the wires. That's our problem. We're pragmatic people. We're practical people. We know that people can't run up walls, and the first thing we do is we look at that and we go, how are we doing that? Oh, okay, I can see it. There's a harness. There's a. No. You have to learn how to not see the wires. You have to learn how to not see the wires, because they don't put on the show so that you can see how the harness works. They put on the show so that you can experience the wonder of watching somebody run up a wall. Now, the problem with the left is the left thinks that people can actually run up walls. We know that's not true. But we've got to also understand that the reason that these things are so moving and so effective is because the left learns how to not see the wires, and the audience doesn't see the wires either. So just because we're practical people doesn't mean that we can't learn how to not see the wires, sit back, and for a moment at least, enjoy the miracle of a crescent moon floating through a room and a man running up a wall. When we learn how to do that, our problems will be over. Join us for part 3 when we deal with specifics about how we can turn this emotion and messaging to our advantage. For Steve, Green, Scott Ott, and the entire Trifecta crew, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us.